Hello and welcome to Racers Now, and it is my pleasure to be joined by Paul Garritty, special guest on Racers Now this week, with SD and myself as we talk about everything that is going on in the betting ring. Paul, an absolute veteran of the betting ring, mainly in the north, but also as far south as Cheltenham, which we'll touch on later in this video. So, Paul, how are you? And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, fine, thanks, boys.
Good. So first things first, on today, Thursday the 28th, it's come out in regards to an extra levy that is going to be pointed in the direction of bookmakers. And to some surprise, it is going to include the rails bookmakers as well, of which, of course, you are. What kind of impact and how have we got to
Not
this
just
stage?
rails.
I know, all bookmakers, but obviously it impacts further and more significantly on those smaller companies, of which the rails bookmakers mainly are. How did that news land with you, Paul? Was it a surprise? There was a consultation process. How have we got to this stage?
I've been out last night. I've actually had 12 pints, and a colleague of mine, Stuart, messaged me, and I soon sobered up when I read this.
Yeah.
There was no evidence to suggest that on-course betting there's anything to do with problem gambling. As we all know, problem gambling is mainly online. It's late at night with these computer games. They're basically betting games of chance. Yeah. I just cannot believe it. Racecourse, as you know, it's every 30, 35 minutes. You have a bet. 99.9% of the bets are by cash. The majority of the bets are small. Average on the flat for us is probably £8-10. Over the sticks, a bit bigger, shorter priced horses, maybe £15. And I just can't believe that, we've come to this stage where we're involved in this. There's no evidence to suggest that we were involved.
So, as I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Labour have come to power, the country's skint for numerous reasons, and they're trying to bring in money from a few avenues. We can talk about pensioners, we can talk about whatever. But so it's basically going to be, is this right, 0.2% on the gross gaming yield? Is that right, Paul?
It is, it's correct. I mean, Smido, the majority of the bookmakers in the country that bet on course are like, as Stephen just said, myself, Mick Eckley, BDC, etc., Pinot, etc. They're nearly 99.99% of them are very small independents, like it's me and Lynn. There's the odd big bookmaker in the country, Star Sports. I'll just name them for once because they are the ones that apparently...
There's not many of them, though. Bets. Yeah. There's only one or two of them.
Yeah. The majority of the people are small on-course bookmakers. And it's just another expense that we're going to have to find, which I don't think that we should be involved at all, to be quite truthful with you.
You're quite right, Paul. Now, just a couple of things on this. So, I think the first thing is what happens, and I don't know the answer to these questions, if you have a back bet, is that taken off your gross turnover?
It is, yeah. And as you well know, I sort of hedge quite a lot. Majority of my hedging is actually done in the ring. You know what I mean? Like, because I like to keep money in the ring.
Will get this 0.2%. And let's just take Newcastle on Saturday. How much will it cost you to stand?
Just 1 second. Just 1 second, Steve. I'll tell you what the badges are.
So for those that don't know, usually a bookmaker who stands as a rail bookmaker has to pay, I think it's either 3 or 4 times whatever the entry fee is for someone like SD to go in at Newcastle. It's 3 or 4. So if the entry fee is 40 quid, they have to pay 120 quid to stand. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, it is true. Yeah, on Saturday we'll have to pay £342 for our 2 pitches to stand. We'll then have to pay to get in. We'll have to contribute towards our market fee. We'll have to pay £25 per pitch for our computer to be used. And that's before you've got fuel, one wage to find, a bit of food, etc. The other week I went to Cheltenham, and as it's been commonly known on our blog, we did it as cheap as we possibly could. Lynn actually cooked 2 nights in the thing. It cost us £3,500 before we set off. And obviously, when you lose on the first day, you're behind the 8 ball right away. You know what I mean? It's because our expenses are going up, and it's not like the turnover is bigger. I just find this is another. All right, it's not a colossal expense, this, but where does it end? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just don't understand. I don't think problem gambling is a problem on the racecourse, and why we've got to pay a levy for this when I don't think we're involved is unfair.
You're quite right, Paul. There's a couple of other points here. So my understanding, and correct me if any of this is wrong, is that the National Lottery is not affected. Now, I'm not privy to gambling studies where the National Lottery promotes bad gambling. But if you look at the amount of games the National Lottery has, it's a lot more than a 7-race card at Newcastle. For some reason, they can't possibly charge that because the money goes to, you know, some bloody stupid Olympian or something. For reasons again unknown, the Tote get a 50% discount.
Yes.
Quite why that is, if problem gambling is linked to the racecourse, which we know is a load of baloney, then the amount should be the same across all, and therefore should be reduced. What on earth is going on? Nobody from the Gambling Commission was available tonight. I've met the Gambling Commission once at Stratford, and 7 of them just sort of went round the betting ring and didn't have a clue what was going on. Pinno was there that day, and he had to explain the difference in Rails and Tattersall's bookmakers and the history therein. So if that's the education level, it's like talking to a bloody dead caterpillar. Correct, Paul?
Well, we might have.
Well, we've absolutely stunned Paul. We've frozen him. I'm sure we can try and get him back, can we, Mr. Technical?
Yeah, no, we will try. No, the point being is that similar, but obviously separate, but similar to the high street bookmakers that are being targeted from all angles, whether that be rights fees, problem gamblers, extra levy, tax, whatever. The point being is these guys that, Paul, he just operates up and down the country 6 days a week with his wife. They're not millionaires by any stretch, and yet they're being, their margins are being chipped away at all angles. For those that don't know, and many won't know that, as Paul was explaining earlier, the fee for them to stand as a rails bookmaker, not only do they have to pay for and own.
Stop saying rails. As a bookmaker, there's rails.
As a bookmaker,
sorry, rails.
Whatever. An on-course bookmaker. If the fee on Cheltenham Gold Cup Day for anyone to enter the racecourse is as a standard ticket is £100, they have to pay 4 or 5 times that fee to stand. That is how their fee is worked out. It's whatever the price for a tax ticket is times 4 or 5. So if it's £100, that's £400 just to stand. So they're minus 400 before they even take a bet. Then they've got their expenses that go into that. What Paul was going to come on to, and what's on his blog, and it's worth checking out Paul's weekly blog, is that in the Cheltenham November meeting, where it wasn't great, there were some small fields, his expenses at Cheltenham November for 3 days were in excess of £3,000. And as a result of that, being nearly 200 miles away from home, Paul, who can now tell you, isn't going to be going back to Cheltenham the November meeting next year because the expenses is just not worth it, given the small fields and the results that go with it. Paul's back. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about the little mishap there with the connection. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I was just talking about Cheltenham November and how stark it was, really, as a reminder that, next year might not be on the agenda.
Yeah, I think we'll have to probably go elsewhere that Saturday, which is unfortunate because we love being at Prestbury Park. It's it's a great race course, great racing, but unfortunately the small fields, which we've had this argument before, because basically that meeting should become a 2-day meeting with 2 7-race cards rather than 6, 7, 6. It's just too diluted, to be quite truthful with you.
Yeah, and on that Sunday, is it not 5 races and a bumper? I mean, that's no way near good enough. Five plus a bumper on a Sunday at Cheltenham. No, thank you. Just before we wrap up, Paul, I was going to ask you about the SP process, because that has changed drastically since pre-COVID. Whereas, the official starting price used to solely rely on the bookmakers on course like you, and now it basically doesn't. Can you explain what's changed and what the current situation is?
Yeah, I think they were always looking to sort of drop us out because we used to get a sort of payment for our SP, which was good, and it was useful money. That has got stopped. I did hear that I think Denise Coates Bet365 were happy to pay for our show, but that hasn't materialised. At the moment, we're in a bit of a standstill. We're trying to still make negotiations to get something, but I mean, as we all know, the SP that's returned now is very, very different from what you can get on track. You know what I mean? Like, this has been, you know, we've mentioned this so many times lately, haven't we? You know what I mean? Like,
Favourites are absolutely way out. I mean,
yeah.
Favourites are way out, and the rags are returned at a ridiculous price. But the overround is not doing anyone any favours. And just on this, if you keep chipping away at your X's, what actually happens? There's a lot of value on course now. You can basically get what you want on. You don't get barred off them, which is great. And if the X's go up, the value on course will erode. Now, quite why they're picking on the little guys, nobody knows. Has anyone even consulted you, Paul, or are there these idiots? And Mr. Rhodes is invited to come on this show if he wants to come on and defend himself, but nobody's speaking to you, are they?
No, it's unfortunate. We all know, you know, the powers that be, they just seem to be oblivious to this. You know, it's just not on. But you ask them, it doesn't matter who you speak to. You know, the problem here, I think, a lot of it does revolve around this gambling commission. I mean, you just met Ted DeForest about when they're at the course. We used to get a home visit off them, and at the time, I bet at the Greyhounds, and he said to me, "You bet at the dogs. What are they? What is dog racing?" You know, and it was quite sort of like embarrassing. And these are people that are sort of judging you. You know, they come in with like it's basically just ticking boxes. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's very disappointing.
They are an organisation who, to be quite frank with you, shouldn't exist. Now, the problem, if you don't know anything about your subject matter, I mean, it's like a police officer investigating, you know, a murder or whatever, who's just qualified as a lollipop man. It's absolutely ridiculous. They're affecting your livelihood. They're affected to a degree my livelihood, because if your expenses go up, I get that your prices won't be or cannot be as competitive, and they will keep chipping these quangos that exist through society. It's absolutely pathetic. So now we've had freezing pensioners, skint farmers, and skint bookmakers. What a time to be alive. We're
just
not
bringing
allowed
it back.
to say it, are we?
Just bringing it back to those that don't know the ins and outs as much as SD and Paul. The starting price, the official starting price, was for a long time determined by the prices in the ring through Paul and his colleagues. When COVID came around and there was no customers on courses, they kind of took advantage and moved that away. So the big names, the big name bookmakers that you see on Oddschecker now decide the starting price. In the main, there is some intricacies, don't get me wrong. And what SD is arguing is that as a result of the starting price being decided off course, the value on course often is with the favourites. You get a bigger price about the favourites on course versus online. And the outsiders often are bigger online than they would be on course. So we've seen, since the change in the starting price process, since COVID, we've seen, 200 to 1 shots win more often than ever before. And that is factually correct, because that price is decided off course, and it would always be 100 to 1 on course. That would pretty much be the maximum price, and now you can get 200 to 1 off course. We could be there a while.
I'll just give you a working example. This is a non-starting price, but I had 400 quid on one with Paul the other week at 6 to 4. At the time, it was bang on 2.5 on the machine. So people say, why don't you bet on the machine? Well, you get taken for 2%. There's one reason. And if you put 400 quid on 15 minutes before the race, do you know what happens? You end up at probably a price of roughly equating to 2.4 rather than 2.5. So you take your 2% off and you're under 11.08.
Paul mentioned earlier hedging in the ring. So again, to make it a bit more basic, what Paul does, if Paul wants to get rid of a bet, he has an agreement between a lot of his colleagues that rather than getting rid of a bet on Betfair on the exchange, he will get rid of it in the ring with his colleagues to keep the cash in the ring and support each other. That might well change with this new levy process, but not to go back to the levy process. But Paul, if you could just explain how that happens and that kind of gentleman's agreement you have and how that works in the ring, really.
Yeah, there's certain bookmakers that I hedge with, particularly like on, I generally hedge with the bookmakers that hedge back with me. There is
Yeah.
certain bookmakers that wouldn't dream of having a bet back with you. They would use the exchange. To me, that's just killing the goose that bloody, you just kill, like you're like a turkey voting for Christmas, aren't you, in the long run? So I try to hedge back as much as I can. And plus as well, certainly the front 2 or 3 in the market, they are right on the button for the price. And there's no argument that the outsiders are bigger on the exchange, and often just in the win-only book, though. You often get this on the TV. They'll say on Racing UK at the races, oh, it's 16 on the machine, but it might be bloody 6-4 for a place if it's a dodgy each way race. Of course, as you know, that is SD's expertise. Dodgy each way races.
I 100% agree with what you're saying there. My final question is, before we wrap up, again, since COVID, we've obviously seen a lot more on the high street in all elements, not just bookmaking. More people using card, me included. Have you seen that reflected in the ring? And what's your percentage cash versus card on your turnover?
To be quite truthful with this, Mido, it's still nearly, I would say, 95 and 99% of our bets are still our cash. The odd time we get card bets, but thankfully, people do like the cash. They like the winnings in the pocket. I wish the racecourses would take this and allow cash to be spent back in the bar, because sometimes I think that they're doing themselves. I think realistically, a lot of the people that run the racecourses do agree with this privately. I think that there is more people using the card, but I certainly always think that actually in the ring, cash is king, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
And it's part of the experience. Paul,
yeah.
Just on chipping away, somebody puts £100 bet on with you.
Yes.
How much does that cost you?
What is it now?
Just for the transaction.
2% we pay on our with us. So really, Stephen, I always say to them, when they come and they ask me, I said, "Have you got cash?" And 9 times out of 10, oh yes, well I have. Occasionally you do get the person who wants to bet on the card, but I don't really want to be seen to be encouraging it, to be quite truthful with you.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Right, okay, well, we could be here all night. As we know, SD loves the rig and Paul operates in it. So brilliant, really interesting stuff there. Thanks for joining us, Paul. And Paul was also part of our weekly Thursday show as we look forward to Newcastle on Saturday. He put one up that's not quite got a price yet, but to keep your eye on as well. So make sure you're checking out our usual Thursday slow. And we'll be back next week with more anti-post, won't we, SD?
We will. And of course, Paul and Lynn will be at Carlisle on Sunday as well.
Excellent. Right, we'll see you next week. Thank you.